And welcome back, and I'm Annette Young, and it's now time for the second part of The World this week, where four journalists join me to chew the fat over what's been making headlines in the last 7 days. And here with me in the studio is Emre Demir, the editor of Zaman France, the Turkish newspaper, our very own France 24's international news reporter Lila Jacinto, Régis Le Sommier, deputy editor of Paris Match, and fellow Australian who also works for Agence France Presse, Mark Burley. Nothing like waving the flag. Now, before the break, we were talking about the fact that it's a case of both good news and bad news for Washington this week. The good news being that Turkey had finally decided to join the struggle against the Islamic State group. The bad news being that they decided to also use an opportunity to crack down on the Kurdish militant group, the PKK. Now, before we went to the break, we were talking about the blowback, Emre, and certainly you being a Turkish person, I'm interested to know what the reaction is in Turkey towards what he's done.
Well, if you look at Turkish press, we're all talking about this war against the PKK. Nobody's talking about ISIS. And I think that it's kind of a PR move from Erdogan, and it's really related to HDP's recent success, political success, because it's not the first time Turkey is bombing PKK's positions in Iraq. It's happened before in 2012, in 2009, and that changed nothing. I think that these bombings are much more related to politics, and concrete measures, concrete actions about ISIS will come later. So I believe that Erdogan is trying to convince the Turkish voters that he's doing the right thing, because a war in Syria against ISIS is not a real popular idea in Turkey. Only 20% of Turkish people are favorable of a war in Syria.
I mean, there are two things here. One is, his targets ISIS and his internal, his domestic thing. What we're not talking about with ISIS is that a lot of people see Erdogan's game here. You have two Turkish enclaves, and if they join up, they're going to take up around 50% of the Turkish-Syrian border. Turkey has been asking for a safe zone. Now, this critical border, Erdogan does not want to see the Kurds control this, the YPG, which is, a franchise of the PKK. So even in this, Erdogan is playing a strategic game. This is an area just north of Aleppo. It's extremely strategic in the war in Syria. And Erdogan, seeing himself as a Sunni Arab savior, will not want to see the Kurds take over this. So that is the game that is being played on the international front. And on the domestic front, he's playing another game. But, he's killing two birds in one shot.
Yes.
And there's a tweet here from Derry C.K. Griffiths. Mr. Erdogan of Turkey never appreciated the Kurds' success against ISIL or ISIS. He felt that they got far too much praise and attention. Régis.
Well, I think it's what I'm wondering right now is where Washington stands, because to see, we've seen praise in the new involvement of Turkey in the conflict, and they're fully joining apparently the coalition. Then again, you're talking about bad news. There was another bad news is the leader of the militant trains by the U.S. who was captured by al-Nusra, I think yesterday, and this is a very, already this program of forming rebels, moderate rebels, have been looked at as a total failure. There's about 50 of them only, and they crossed the border and they started fighting, and apparently they got, ambushed or taken hostage by a rival group, al-Nusra. So this is not going very well. And on another front, Washington and Ankara are talking about building a free ISIS zone in northern Syria. But what will this free ISIS zone be made of? Is it going to be made of Kurds, or is it we don't really know. So it's very puzzling what's happening there. It's
if you want to know what is Washington thinking, as I said in a column, it's all about that base, the infinite
So did
base.
they make a Faustian pact?
They do make a Faustian pact, and once again, it's game unchanged. Turkey is too big, too important, a NATO member to really annoy, and so the Kurds can fry.
There's nothing decisive in it all. You've got, to everybody else, it seems really confusing what's happening down there. There's so many loyalties. Okay, you've got the Kurds who are fighting and in many cases winning against ISIS. Now, the Kurds are funded, armed by the Americans. The Turks don't like the Kurds getting so strong, so they're weakening the Kurds. I think last week they hit 3 ISIS targets, 400 PKK targets. They're really weakening, making sure that it's not a state. You've got Hezbollah, which is run by the Iranians down by the border just over from Lebanon. And in the south, you've got the moderate rebels that the Americans have done. Essentially because nothing decisive is being done, and we're getting these various players weakening enemies or enemies of enemies. You're ending up with this situation where it's, yes, a very fragmented state now, and you're not going to end up with the decisive movement in any way in Syria.
But it's also just added a very dangerous element to a very unstable part of the world, hasn't it, this move by Erdogan?
Well, what it did was it removed a pole of stability. I mean, the Kurds were consolidating. There was a real fear that they were going to create a pan-Iraq Syrian state up in the north.
And that was happy about it,
yeah,
except Erdogan.
Except Turkey hasn't got out of its mindset of the past 40 years that it's been fighting the Kurds with the peace deal and all the rest of it, but it's still been a 40-year mindset. ISIS has been around for 2 years now? I mean, you don't change policy on a dime like that. PKK, the Kurds, the whole thing, that certainly seems to be Turkey's target.
Okay, well, it's time now to switch topics, and what a difference a month makes. At the beginning of July, the French news weekly Le Point magazine were describing the French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius as the Iron Man of Iran. This courtesy of his tough stance during the negotiations that led to the signing of that historic nuclear agreement with Tehran on July 14. But this Wednesday, Fabius flew in to the Iranian capital, the latest in a string of visits by officials from European countries seeking closer economic and political ties with the Iranians. It seems it was a case of letting bygones be bygones.
We are interested in the establishment of peace and stability in the region. We should not forget that the essence of the nuclear agreement is the peace and constancy. And this is not merely a technical agreement that says, for example, yes to peaceful utilization and no to military use, but rather an agreement that brings peace and stability to the world.
I hope that today's visit by my colleague, Mr. Fabius, to Iran will prepare the ground for the expansion of relations and the removal of misunderstandings that have shadowed our relations over the past few years. We hope to witness increasing development of ties in line with the interests of the two countries and the strengthening of peace and security in the region and in the world.
Seems all parties seem to be suffering from short-term memory loss.
Yeah, they certainly do. But I over this, nuclear deal, I'm very surprised. I mean, you're mentioning this hawkish position that Laurent Fabius has had, and that France at large had had towards Iran. I don't really see, at the end of the day, now that we have this deal, in what way France will benefit from that. Honestly, everybody seems to be happy with the deal, except, John McCain and a few people in Congress in the U.S. But other than that, it seems that...
And the Saudis and the Israelis
yes,
and the Gulf states. There's not a lot of
right,
people.
But I'm talking about, the people that actually participated in the deal. Obama praised that deal. John Kerry's happy. Now, what France had... what did that bring France in a better position, or what did we gain from that? Because at the same moment, Laurent Fabius is going to Tehran, like that was 2 days ago. Germany was going, and it was not the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
It was the
Germany.
Vice Chancellor.
It was the Vice Chancellor, and he brought along with him 10 of the heads of the major CEO of the major companies in Germany. Laurent Fabius said, "I'm not bringing any people with me, business leaders. I'm just waiting." I mean, what are we waiting? Everybody, I mean, this is a new market. Everybody's happy
Not
that...
a new market for France. France had to suspend its market. Iran was the biggest export market for cars. Outside of France, it was the second biggest
with
market.
the embargo, it was,
it was forced by the Americans to pull out of that. And France is essentially the figurehead state for Airbus. And Boeing and Airbus are the two biggest beneficiaries that are going to come out of this in the immediate thing. Fabius, I think there's a lot of stuff that's going on that we're not seeing. That I think the Germans have a lot of room to catch up for. And I don't quite agree with this idea that just because France was so hawkish that this will play against it in the commercial field. The Iranians are incredibly canny and drive very, very hard bargains, and they don't particularly care who's friends with you or not. They're looking to play all the Western countries off each other and get the absolute best deal and the smallest margins for their negotiating partner.
So money talks at the end of the day.
For the Iranians, definitely.
It is money
but
talk.
how much does French money talk when you're talking about U.S. money entering into this picture? And I think you're right. France has not played a very smart game on this.
And the Americans have to get past congressmen who have, maybe Boeing plants in their state and a bunch of voters who aren't so happy about deals going on. France doesn't have any of those electoral problems with its business.
Well, I agree with Mark. France had a special relationship with Iran regarding to economic ties, especially Peugeot, Renault, and I think that there's an obvious willingness from France to take part an important role in Iran's new blooming trade deals. So I think if you remember last year, MEDEF, a French business organization, held a trip to Iran with over 100 businessmen, CEOs, etc. And I think that France will play an important role regarding to economic ties, regarding to investments. Comparing to US, maybe it will be less important, but I think France will be again the one of the main partners of Iran.
Just out of interest, how is Ankara viewing all of this?
Well, Ankara had always a good trade relationship with Iran. During the sanctions, Turkey had other ways to continue this trade. So I think Ankara will benefit also from this opening of Iran.
It's a great partnership there because Turkey needs oil and Iran has a lot of it.
But I just want to come back to what Regis and Leila were saying earlier and talking about the image that France has. I mean, and the reality is for a lot of people in the region, France is seen as being particularly close to those Sunni Gulf states. What do you think? I mean, do you think what Laurent Fabius has done has damaged the nation's image in that region, Regis?
I don't think it has damaged the nation image, but I think France has, you're talking about the Gulf state and you're talking about Saudi Arabia. France has weapons to sell, and I think in a way they thought that given that the image, the American image was sliding towards Iran, then France thought they could play a card there, like by taking taking over for America but politically, I don't think it's beneficial, honestly. To be more royalist than the king is not brought France any more, any tools or any leverage in that in that region. I don't think. I think with commercially maybe we've sold weapons. Maybe with we're making our military exports rise. That's certain. We've been able to finally to sell our Rafales after 20 years of trying desperate, but to Egypt and then to a number of Gulf states. So this has been a major achievement, but I don't think we've been able to weigh as much as we previous position we had, like for instance, think about what Villepin did when he refused to join with the Americans to go in Iraq. Then France had an incredible capital in the Arab world at that time. I don't think we have that anymore.
I don't think, like you, I don't think it's damage. It's just France's insignificance, and and bear
terrible.
In mind that's
one of the conclusions.
Exactly, and bear in mind there are a lot of other players waiting to get in. 2015, we can talk about Chinese investments, Indian investments. investments. There are a lot of other players in this.
And
French.
remind that a lot of these countries, including China, have already invested heavily in Iran because they were going around the embargo.
When I was in Iran, 2011, 2012, it became quickly clear that the Chinese didn't have the technology, particularly in repumping the oil, that the Americans, the Japanese, and the French do. And this is particularly what the Iranians want. And they're very keen, I believe, to play the French and the Americans off each other where they can in the sectors. They'll pick up other contracts where they can, but it's purely commercial. They've got a very good idea, and you go in with the Iranians with an idea of strength. You don't go in and try be best friends, because then they'll just try and extract even more out of you.
Okay, now finally, we may be getting closer to finding out more about one of the great aviation mysteries in recent times. Malaysian officials say they're, quote, moving closer to solving what happened to that disappeared Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. This after a series of numbers etched on a wing fragment washed up on the island of Reunion, confirming that the debris was indeed that of a Boeing 777. The plane went missing en route from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing in March 2014, and searchers are still continuing to comb through the shoreline for more evidence, and investigators are sending debris to France for further analysis.
Obviously, there's strong evidence to suggest that the wreckage found on Reunion Island does come from a Boeing 777. That has not yet been confirmed, but the pictures that are available for people to examine are certainly consistent with the parts from the wing of a Boeing 777.
Mark, we were hearing there from the Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, and of course the Australians have been leading the search, but having said that, it looks increasingly likely that it is indeed the plane.
And that's about all we can really say today. Same thing as yesterday. I mean, there are no other 777s missing in the world. Everyone's saying this looks 777, so by deduction this has to be from MH370. Now, I saw, reading all the reports, I'm seeing, one or two of the passengers saying, well, at least this gives us a degree of closure. So there's that level. But, all the journalists are also saying, who are covering this, that this doesn't tell us where the crash site is. The main work is still out there, and what we really want are the black boxes.
And Leila, there's lots of theories as to what happened on that fateful night.
And that, frankly, I don't know how this advances this story. So we found the debris. We still do not know where, what happened to this plane.
We'll know whether it exploded, impact. We will know that if this is from MH.
Well, at least we know now that it indeed is on the bottom of the Indian Ocean, and those conspiracy theories.
Right, that asteroids did not bring this down.
We also know that we were not looking in the right direction.
Yes.
We were.
Well, no, they say the currents can take this anywhere. There are currents that way and that way.
Yes, but that's off the coast of Madagascar, honestly. And most of the research has been far south and much closer to.
Right, and then we
Australia.
still have this vast seabed to search for this.
That's
and,
right.
The currents will take it anywhere.
The Australians say they're still very confident that they're in the right area.
Well, certainly.
What is interesting is they were about to call the search off pretty soon because they hadn't found anything. This will obviously prolong the search.
And they certainly said if you look at sort of tidal patterns in the ocean, it's inevitable if it did sort of plonk down on the sea floor in the Indian Ocean, at some point it was going to end up somewhere near Africa. Reggie, it's still incredible. I mean, we've been talking about this for over 18 months now, but that in this day and age with GPS and Google Maps, that a plane the size of a Boeing 777 can disappear off the map.
Yeah, that's mind-boggling, I think, and it's still, at the newsroom in Paris Match, we've been, for years, and like in other places, thinking we have to go back to this story. I mean, we put an investigator, Marc Dugan, who actually believed that the plane was heading towards Diego Suarez and was probably with everybody dead in it. And so his theory was that the plane crashed or was shut down, maybe because Diego Suarez, as you know, is a big U.S. base covering the whole scope of the Indian Ocean. So yeah, it's something that we can't go to bed and think we can sleep with thinking that an entire airplane has disappeared like this.
Emery, the last few years in aviation haven't been too good. I mean, we've had that horrendous incident with 370, and then, a few months later, the Malaysian Airlines plane being sort of targeted over eastern Ukraine, and now the German wings crash. Does it make you think twice every time now you get on a flight?
Of course, everybody, I think. It's striking to see that it is one of the safest transport machines in the world, controlled by a 30-year experienced pilot, and it vanished completely. So, and 1 year after all hundreds of millions of dollars spent for searching, and we have finally a specific physical clue to find out what happened to this flight, to this plane. But according to some reports I read today, especially in New York Times, I saw that this particular piece fragment will not be sufficient to explain the whole story of what happened to this plane. But I think it's still it's still a relief for the parents of the victims for the coup.
And we're going to continue with this story, so, no sleep for you, Regis.
No sleep for us investigative reporter either. I mean, but Mark and you and I know that we get on those long-haul flights for 24 hours from one end of the world to the other.
Well, airlines have a great way of distracting you. They put the seats so close together that you're so worried about your knee, you're not even thinking about anything else at that point. And if you can actually get through that, then you're watching films.
OK, we're going to have to leave it there for this portion of the world this week, and it's time now for Media Watch. And I'm joined here in the studio by Emma James, and you've been taking a look at the other big story that's had everybody talking. I mean, the really important story, and that's the death of Cecil the lion.
Absolutely. It is the thing that has got everyone talking, tweeting, petitioning about this week. And the latest is that really the hunter has very much now become the hunted. And Zimbabwe is pushing for Walter Palmer now to be extradited. If we take a look at this article in The Guardian, they report that the Environment Minister Oppo Muchinguri says he should face trial for financing an illegal hunt. Remember, he paid $50,000 for the right to kill this, well, not the right, but the opportunity to kill this lion. She refers to the 55-year-old dentist as a foreign poacher, not a trophy hunter, which is quite an interesting distinction. And she says that he must be made accountable now. Now, what the US is looking at, though, is whether or not any American laws have been broken, because the extradition treaty between the US and Zimbabwe dictates that if there is a charge, it must be deemed to be a criminal offence in both countries. So that's really what's going to be the litmus test on this one, whether the Americans decide that this actually was a crime had it been committed on American soil. Meanwhile, the White House is looking at whether or not is going to have to look basically now at a petition about this issue, because the requirement is, if it's an official White House petition, they have to reach 100,000 signatures. By Friday morning, we're already at 160,000. We're now getting close to 180,000. And these are people calling for Walter Palmer to be extradited to Zimbabwe. So this is very much directed at the corridors of power. The White House have said that they will actually look at this now and consider it. So we're basically waiting to see what the US officials are going to do, because it looks as though Zimbabwe are going to push this all the way.
Now, what about the man himself? Have we had any statements from Walter Palmer?
Walter Palmer has very much gone to ground, and a little
Not
earlier,
surprisingly.
yes, fairly unsurprisingly. Earlier on this week, you might have been forgiven for thinking that things weren't being taken too seriously, because this was a tweet from River Dental Bluff, which is his practice, saying, "This is too much, we're going to sign off for a little bit, brush your teeth, please." So that was the response from his dental practice, which is currently closed down, is being besieged by people wearing lion costumes, leaving stuffed toys, and leaving messages saying, "Rot in hell," and the like. This message in particular was left outside Palmer's house, saying, "You are an abomination, the world will hunt you down." So unsurprising, really, then, that he is in hiding. Now, it is the US officials who are trying to track him down, and they say, "We're certain he knows we're looking for him." They've tried many and varied ways of getting in touch with him. But interestingly, the Washington Post here has spoken to Ed Grace, who is the Chief of Law Enforcement at the US Fish and Wildlife Service. And he says that he he knows that this hunter knows how to get in touch with them because, he reveals, he has already been convicted by that service for lying about a bear kill in Wisconsin several years ago. So he's known to the authorities, he knows where he should be getting in touch with, but so far, no word from Walter Palmer.
Now, the scale of the global reaction has been questioned by some, but there's no doubt there's a bigger picture being highlighted here, isn't it?
Absolutely. Some are complaining about the fact that there's not enough fuss about matters involving human rights, or maybe the Black Lives Matter organisation, the bandwagon there, saying, you know, why are you getting so outraged about the death of a lion? But as the Global Post points out, Cecil the lion is part of a bigger problem. And what their article highlights is the 6 endangered animals that poachers are currently hunting to the brink of extinction, which of course does include lions. Now they say each year humans deliberately kill thousands of the animals we're privileged to share the planet with, even the ones we nominally call protected. Now they blame 3 groups of people specifically: trophy hunters, criminals, and those who are simply desperate to get their hands on some cash. Now, of these 6 endangered animals, they include elephants, tigers, sea turtles, lemurs and gorillas, and also rhinos. And I think the amazing standout fact in this article about the rhinos is that the horn sells for $65,000 per kilo. Now, that's actually more expensive by weight than gold, diamonds or cocaine. So this is why, this is the fundamental problem with this. If you can make that much money from it, people will take the risk. The I-100 looks at all the endangered animals that you are perfectly legal to hunt and in which countries, which is an interesting little breakdown on that one. But there are others saying that maybe this is actually going to be a chance to create some good, that Cecil can actually leave a real legacy here. This blog post from Steve Backshall, who's a writer, broadcaster and naturalist, he talks about the fact that this current storm could make a difference. It could lead to restrictions or bans on the importing of animal trophies into the US, which could really put a big dent in the whole business, because he says even the richest of hunters aren't likely to want to spend thousands and thousands and come back empty-handed, especially now that if all you've got is to show for yourself is a glory photo that most people are going to be repulsed by, given how much coverage this has had. Now, the last word goes to Arnold Schwarzenegger, who put this on his Instagram feed earlier today. It's just fabulous. These are trophies. This is not.
Well, as one could say, and excuse the pun, this indeed could be a game changer.
Indeed.
That's for sure.
Could be a catalyst.
OK, that's Emma James with Media Watch. At this point, let me also thank my wonderful guests who joined me for this edition of The World This Week. Do stay with us here on France 24 for more news and headlines, which are coming up very shortly.